South Africa is a beautiful and diverse country, and it's a very popular tourist destination. But there are a few things that you should know before traveling here, like do you need a visa, how do you get around, what is the best time to travel, and something that a lot of people wonder, is South Africa safe? In this video, I'll answer all of these questions and more so you have all the information you need to travel to South Africa in one video, and I'll tell you whether I think South Africa is safe or not at the end. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Laura and I've spent the past few years traveling around Africa and Europe. So if you like travel content like travel vlogs or more informational videos like this one, make sure you subscribe and you hit the bell for notifications. So the first question that you should always ask yourself when you travel to another country is whether you need a visa to travel there. So South Africa is actually pretty lenient with its visas and most nationalities can enter the country visa-free for 30 to 90 days. That said, there are some exceptions. Passport holders from China, India, Nigeria, Uganda and Ethiopia, just to name a few, do need visas to enter South Africa. I left a link in the description down below to a website called Passport Index that has a travel visa checker so you can see if you need a visa to enter South Africa or not. That said, I do suggest that you double check this before you travel because things like these can change. As well as visa requirements, you may need some vaccination requirements to enter South Africa, but before I continue, I want to say that I am not a doctor or a healthcare professional, so please consult one for everything that I'm going to say in this section. You have to present a yellow fever vaccination certificate if you're coming from a country at risk of transmission or you have a layover in one that is longer than 12 hours. Countries at risk of transmission include most sub-Saharan African countries as well as many South American ones. So if you're traveling from, say, the UK or the US and you don't have any layovers in Africa or South America, you don't need to be vaccinated against yellow fever to enter South Africa. But if you're coming from a country like the DR Congo, Ghana or Brazil, then you do need to be vaccinated. It's worth mentioning that many other African countries have similar requirements regarding the yellow fever vaccination, and South Africa is considered a country at risk of transmission. So if you're planning to travel to another African country after your visit to South Africa, for example, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, or Namibia, you would need to be vaccinated to enter those countries. There are other health recommendations for people traveling to South Africa that are not requirements. People often have a lot of questions about malaria, for example. So most of South Africa is free of malaria, so if you're traveling to a place like Cape Town, you don't have to worry about it at all. But in certain parts like the northeast of the country or Kruger National Park, it still exists. And even though incidence is low, I suggest you talk to a doctor about malaria medication. I'll leave a link to a CDC website in the description, which is the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention that has more information about travel health in South Africa. I really recommend that you read that before you travel. Something else that you should know about South Africa is that it often has problems with its power supply and power cuts are very frequent. This is something called load shedding and it basically occurs when demand for electricity exceeds supply. I'm not going to get into the politics of it because this is a very controversial issue in South Africa, but what you need to know is that there are frequent power cuts and they can last for a few hours at a time. To avoid this, just make sure that you book an accommodation that has a generator that can be turned on when power cuts happen. Most big hotels have them, but smaller establishments like hostels or Airbnbs may not, so just check that before you book anything. I also recommend that you bring a portable power bank with you in case you need to charge your phone urgently. And something else you should really know regarding electricity is that plugs in South Africa are unique to the country and you can't find them anywhere else in the world, so you need a plug adapter specifically for South Africa. So I actually had a bit of a bad experience with this. I had a universal plug adapter that was supposed to work for every country, but it turns out it worked for every country except South Africa. So I found that out the day that I left, and I tried finding a plug adapter for South Africa in the airports that I had layovers in, and mind you, they were pretty major international airports, but I didn't find one. So I finally got a plug adapter when I got to South Africa, but just learn from my mistakes and order yours on Amazon before you leave. So now that I've covered all the logistics and we've got that out of the way, what is the best time to travel to South Africa? So South Africa is a year-round destination, and no matter when you travel here, you're going to have plenty to see and do. That said, if you want to go on safari, the best months to visit are May to September. If you want to go to Cape Town, however, the best months are November to February. And if you want to experience a combination of these things and visit other regions, September is the best month to travel. South Africa is a huge country and it's incredibly diverse. It's impossible to talk about every single thing that it has in one video, like I could do an entire series about this, but I'll make sure I include the most important tourist spots here. So firstly, I have to mention Cape Town. Cape Town is one of my favorite places in the entire world, and I don't say that about cities often. I honestly didn't think that I would like Cape Town when I first traveled there, but I soon realized that I couldn't get enough of it. The city itself has lots of culture, history, and art, and it's also surrounded by incredible nature. It has lovely beaches, the Cape Point National Park and the Cape of Good Hope are nearby, the Simonstown Penguin Colony where you can see African penguins, the Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens, as well as Table Mountain, of course. If you want to know more about what you can see and do specifically in Cape Town, I actually have a video that talks about that more in detail. I'll make sure I put it on the screen and I'll link it in the description as well. It's an old video, so the quality isn't great, but the information is very good. Of course, South Africa is also known for its safaris, and Kruger National Park in the northeast of the country is one of the most famous safari parks in the world. South Africa is also pretty unique because it has a number of private reserves where you can go on safari, which is not very common in other African countries. That said, I feel like I have to give you a bit of advice when it comes to safaris in South Africa. Safaris are great if you plan to do other things as well, but if you're traveling to South Africa exclusively for safari, I suggest you reconsider your destination. In my opinion, safaris in South Africa are really good, but they're not the best. And if you've only got safari in mind for your trip, I think there are better destinations for you. If you want to know why I think South African safaris aren't the best and where you can go instead, you can watch this video about the best safaris in Africa where I answer both of these questions and more. And lastly, I have to mention road trips. South Africa has some of the best road trips in the world, and they're a great way of traveling in this huge and diverse country and getting a taste of its multiple regions. So the first road trip that I'm going to talk about is the Panorama Route, and this is a road trip that I have done myself and that I 100% recommend. It starts in either Johannesburg or Pretoria, and it takes you through the northern province of Mpumalanga all the way to Kruger National Park. It has some amazing stops along the way, such as Blood River Canyon, which is the world's largest green canyon, Borgslug's potholes, the 3 rondavels, and this amazing place called God's Window. It's also very convenient if you enter South Africa via the OR Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg and you want to make your way to Kruger National Park. Another great road trip in South Africa is the Garden Route, which is something that I'm looking forward to doing myself, and it either starts or ends in Cape Town, and it goes along South Africa's beautiful coast. On top of city life and beaches, you can also spot lots of wildlife and lots of culture and history along the way. Some people also do a longer version of the Garden Route that takes them all the way to Johannesburg or to Durban, and this also allows them to see the Drakensberg Mountains. A great place to find activities and things to do in South Africa is Get Your Guide. So I use Get Your Guide a lot, and it's super easy to find the activity that you're looking for, book it, and the activities themselves are great. For example, I found this tour, which includes the Panorama Route and Kruger National Park, at a very reasonable price. And I also found this one for the Garden Route that I would love to do someday. If you're like me and you don't have a driver's license, or you just want to travel with a guide instead of going about it yourself, these are great options. Of course, you can also find lots of other safaris and lots of activities to do in Cape Town, such as this whale watching experience in Hermanus, these hop-on hop-off bus tour and Table Mountain tickets, or this Cape Point and Boulders Beach day trip. The last 2 activities I've done myself, and I absolutely loved them. I 100% recommend them. I'll leave a link to all of the Get Your Guide activities in the description, and it doesn't cost you anything extra to book through that link, but it does give me a commission, so I would really appreciate it if you use that link if you end up booking any activities with Get Your Guide. So now that you have an idea of what to see in South Africa, how do you get around? Because South Africa is such a big country, if you want to get from one city to another, your best option is to fly, unless you're doing a road trip, of course. South Africa's cities are unfortunately not very walkable, so to move around I recommend using Uber, which is what a lot of locals do, and walk only in areas that you know to be safe. When it comes to language, South Africa has 11 official languages. English is one of them, and it is spoken pretty widely, so you shouldn't have a lot of issues communicating. As for currency, South Africa's currency is the South African rand. As of right now, $1 is roughly 18 rands, but of course these things can change, so make sure you check the exchange rates before you leave. You won't have any issues finding ATMs, banks, or financial services in cities, but you may not have such easy access to them in rural areas, so plan ahead if you're planning on going to the countryside. Okay, and now for the question that I know a lot of you were waiting for. Is South Africa safe? Let's talk about that. South Africa has a bad reputation for being unsafe, which puts a lot of people off from traveling to this beautiful country. And on the surface, crime statistics don't look great for South Africa. Take Cape Town, for example. It has consistently been amongst the 20 most dangerous cities in the world, and it has high crime rates, particularly for violent crime. And the unfortunate reality for many people living in South Africa, although definitely not the entire population, is that they often have to live with crime. But it's also important to remember that the safety situation for locals and tourists is often quite different in most tourist destinations, but mainstream media doesn't talk about this often. Media reports often show us terrible crimes occurring in South Africa, and while mainstream media does give us accurate and verified information, it often fails to give us the bigger picture. And when it comes to tourist safety in South Africa, there's a whole other set of statistics that the media rarely tells you about. Going back to the Cape Town example, millions of tourists visit Cape Town every single year. In 2019, 5.4 million tourists came in through the Cape Town airport alone. The city has become one of the world's best tourism destinations, and since 2011 it has won many awards, including being voted the world's top tourist city for the 7th time at the 2019 Telegraph Awards. And lastly, 97% of the people who visited Cape Town said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their experience in the city, and I can definitely count myself into that statistic. So what does this mean for you as a tourist? So like I said, South Africa does have a high crime rate, and you should take extra precautions when you travel here. But you also shouldn't excessively worry about it, and chances are that you will have a great time in South Africa. So here are some ways that you can make your trip to South Africa safe and enjoyable. Firstly, just have some common sense. When you travel, you're always going to be a bit more vulnerable, so make sure you're aware of your surroundings, you don't walk alone at night, you don't flash any expensive belongings, and make sure that you know the emergency numbers in case you need to ask for help. Most crimes targeted at tourists in South Africa are muggings and robberies, so bear that in mind. Don't carry a lot of cash, and carry copies of important documents with you. Also, use ATMs inside, since this is a place where muggings tend to occur. You should also know that credit and debit card fraud is relatively common in South Africa, so watch where your card goes and don't hand out your details to just about anyone. These things do change though, so make sure you do a bit more research before you travel. So, is South Africa safe? Look, no place is 100% safe, and people are always going to have a different definition of safety. But after having seen all the statistics and having traveled there myself, I definitely consider South Africa to be a safe country for tourism. I definitely recommend it, and I would 100% travel there again myself. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and you hit the bell for notifications, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.